Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted frontiers of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
I'm Dean.
I'm Chris.
All right.
Yeah.
We got a guest here today. We tried very hard to get him a mic. We tried very hard. Dean tried very hard. I just drank beer and watched him, but
I brought an extra audio interface, an extra microphone, and I spent about an hour, and I think I broke my microphone.
Yeah, he dropped it on the way here in the rain. No,
it's probably a good thing. We don't want me having a mic.
Yeah, we do. Honest. Yes, we do. And we're going to figure it out, and we're going to get some, we'll be able to do this more.
I'm just making him sit on my lap so we can share a mic now.
It's very cute watching you guys over here.
My feet have never touched each other this much.
So we are episode 49.
Yeah, episode 49.
And Dean's got a little video and some stuff
the topic
for us
today is we're going to be covering this video I found recently. This is from a YouTube channel, which I'll link, called Agrippa's Diary. And this is like almost like a remaster. He uses like AI and stuff to like remaster and clean up the audio. This is an Alan Watts recording talking about Carl Jung. And he's talking about the idea of the philosophy of good and evil and like how to integrate the dark side of yourself.
Yes.
In a healthy way.
Did we talk about this on the podcast last time, or did me and you had a conversation in the backyard?
We talked about doing this.
Yeah.
I think in the backyard.
Yeah.
I don't think on the
Okay.
podcast. But
we basically have like side podcasts while we're in the middle of podcasts a lot of times. So
does this guy only believe, like he believes in duality of good and evil?
The soul, the physicality, like he kind of... Yeah,
so
we'll dive into it.
The quick preview is, if I recall, is that essentially we both have these parts of our, like we have both these sides to ourselves, and if we try and like be only one and exclude the other, it becomes unhealthy. And we actually have to embrace both aspects of ourselves. Is the super short
the gist. But so let's start off. I had we don't have to play it on here, but we did the little we'll just skip the anyway. So
what's this Lockheed?
This Lockheed tech was I was researching and like looking through a bunch of videos on just UFOs, obviously, like I do. And this one popped up, and it probably had something to do with Immaculate Constellation. Me searching it and like looking at stuff, and but this is like what Lockheed Martin Aerospace Technologies, they actually are developing so many cool things that are like alien tech, basically. They're coming out, and then probably in the near future, these are like people talking about them.
Yeah, I've heard people talk about that sort of angle on why like this push for disclosure is happening right now.
Because things are just going to start coming out.
Well, because these aerospace companies who've been doing the reverse engineering for so long, like they want to start releasing products based on this technology, and as long as it's all top secret, they can't.
All right, let's play this real quick.
All right.
Embed the carbon nanotubes to make conductive structure so that information doesn't flow through a wire next to a structure, but literally flows through the structure.
We'll be able to grow or make a structure that, say, is the skin of an aircraft, that inside of that is also contained the sensors or the energy storage or many different multiple functions.
New materials that are on the lab bench right now, they can literally change shape on command. They can become almost a muscular material.
We could have an airplane that optimizes its shape for the different flight conditions it's in.
There's definitely a lot of amazing technology that's going on with the Lockheed Samurai, based on a small maple seed-like looking device. The fact that we can package enough energy for something like that to fly and still carry a sensor, a camera, enough control capability for it to fly is amazing to me. As we go forward, we're going to find new ways of using these unmanned vehicles.
They'll probably be autonomous, so they'll be like UAVs, but carry cargo around where there are currently no infrastructure in place.
We may have small swarms of small vehicles interacting with a larger vehicle that basically combines the information from that swarm. So maybe one vehicle flies a small distance and another vehicle learns from it and knows which way to fly.
Probably what makes sense is a heterogeneous swarm. One where not every element of the swarm is the same. Some elements of the swarm carrying sensors, some carrying other types of electronics. So it's an adaptable system that can adapt to a changing environment and a changing future that is difficult for us to predict.
The true value of research is not in the answer you get that you knew you were looking for, but the answer that you find that you didn't know to look for.
That's a hell of a Lockheed Martin ad.
No kidding. So if you want, yeah, you guys can invest. I have a link here. You guys can, I'm just kidding.
Dude,
you guys can invest in Lockheed.
listening to your guys' podcast is not the same as actually seeing the clips. I realize I'm such a visual learner.
Yeah, dude,
Well,
I am too.
You should watch our YouTubes or Rumbles then.
Oh, yeah, I guess I could do that.
You good? Yeah, I got all the video. Like that's what I'll put all the videos in there usually.
Oh.
So anything, and when you're hearing it, you just watch it while you're listening.
Yeah, I just listen on the Apple podcast. That's what I listen to.
Yeah.
Okay, well you got to get on that YouTube Rumble, man. I'm telling you.
Not all the shows are as visual.
We were having some
yeah.
good comments before too. We've gone dark for a couple months, but we had some good comments too. If you want to get in there and get spicy with some of our commenters.
Gotten dark?
Yeah, they haven't just been commenting for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
What about my mom?
yeah. So that was interesting. I was thinking about
comments.
She sent us.
It depends what shows we're doing.
usually.
Yeah, she usually texts us, but it depends on like what our last show is about. Sometimes she has more to say than other times.
Most of the time when we're talking about UFO stuff, she's kind of quiet. But then when we talk about like spiritual stuff or
like anytime we do the Secret History of the World episodes, she loves
those. Yeah.
Where's your?
We need to get back into those. I haven't been.
We haven't
reading
done
that
one
as
in a
much.
while. Yeah.
Where do you guys think your audience is growing more towards? Which
UFO and like I would say not UFO specifically, but I've, especially on YouTube and Rumble where we get a lot of the video stuff. Our most successful stuff was like Chris Bledsoe
and the
dude.
Trump
and like the Trump shooting was a big one because
really
I think
popular
just
one.
the majority of Americans were like
We were
gotta
pretty
figure
quick
some
with
stuff
that
out.
one, and we went
Yeah.
pretty deep, and
Yeah.
the Bledsoe stuff's sick.
The Bledsoe
Yeah.
stuff is
Yeah.
insane, and it ties back to UFOs. It also ties to a lot of the spiritual stuff, and it ties to religion and like tons of different stuff.
It
so,
kind of connects a bunch of the topics.
yeah, that's one of my favorite episodes we did too, and I think we should dive going back into it because he's releasing videos daily on his Instagram. And he's talking and he's showing orbs and stuff. We can at least show some of the videos he's doing.
Did you notice in this video that some of the 38 DIRDs that Hal put off?
Yep.
That episode we did?
Yep.
Some of those were the tech they're talking about here. Like the shape-shifting like materials.
That's why I was thinking about this, and because I've also been seeing clips of like a supposed leak that's coming out of a craft that had been seen near one of the aircraft or Air Force craft or some sort of like army or military aircraft. And it like came super close and almost hit them, but then it like stopped and like backed off like instantly.
Interesting.
And the shape of it was like it morphed. Like it came in as like it was like a bird with wings out, and then when it came up close, it like brought its wings into like almost be like a triangle over like a opening in the middle.
What's the Jordan Peele movie about the UFO? What's that called?
Is that the scary one?
Yeah, it's like semi-horror.
I never actually watched it, so I don't know.
It's got the
Nope.
dude.
Is it Nope?
Oh, it might be Nope.
Yeah, it's
Is it Nope?
Yeah,
Is it Nope?
with Glenn from Walking Dead.
I think it's called Nope.
Yeah, I think it's called Nope.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nope.
I love
They have a crazy UFO in that one, and
Really?
it like changes shape. It like
Dude.
opens up like a bird's wings.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Dude, what if that's what we're seeing? Like the jellyfish the triangle. Like there's so many different shapes too. Like what if it's literally just that? Like whatever it is that's controlling it is able to like just manipulate the surface of it, or like send it certain designs for certain areas, or like the jellyfish, the one that we seen in that one video where it's in like the desert or whatever. It looks like
I think it's Afghanistan or something.
It looks like one of those little probes from Star Wars. They're like beep, beep,
it does.
beep, beep,
Yeah, it does.
beep, beep, you know, and it's just flying through the desert. It looks like one of those. Straight up.
Why are you not a voice actor for Star Wars yet?
Let's hear the Wookey.
That's what we're drinking right now.
That's true.
Oh yeah,
we're drinking.
Hey
beer.
Chris, why don't you do our beer review?
Yeah, do the beer read.
All right, I got you. We're trying a Firestone Walker beer.
Don't mess this up. I'm gonna go grab a new one.
It's a black rye IPA, and it's my grandpa. You guys usually hear dad, but it's my grandpa's approved alcohol content rating. It's 8 point. Where does it say it?
It says 8.3.
Yeah, 8.3.
8.3 APV.
Yeah, and it's got some.
I say ABV.
Is that APV?
Alcohol by volume.
BV. Yeah.
ABV.
But yeah, it's called Wookey Jack. It's a black rye IPA from Firestone Walker. It's got some cool Sacramento purple in it and a little like troll Viking looking guy.
It's got a couple cryptids in here. It's got like a dwarf, elf, Wookey, a lion, and a bear.
It's very mythic.
Some skull heads there. Yeah, no, this is a great pick. Did you pick this one, Chris?
I saw it said Wookey, and
he pointed at it on the shelf, and I was like, it does say Wookey. Let's get that.
It's a California.
I was like, black rye? That sounds good. Black rye IPA.
Wait, Firestone is from California?
Yes.
Sick. This was a good pick then. How did you think
Wookey
of the
Jack.
What'd you think of the did you like it? It was Yeah, see, I'm fluent in his Wookey. He said it was a 6 out of 10.
Right on.
All right, should we do our weekly Bashar?
Let's do that.
Are born in physical reality. The first moment that you crystallize, shall we say, your spirit into the physical matrix, it crystallizes a kind of pattern within you that represents the idea of your soul agreement, your relationship to your higher self at that moment. What happens to it from there on will depend upon a lot of things, including input from your parents, society, so on and so forth. But that core agreement, that core relationship will always exist. When you are born...
Interesting. So this is talking about like when you are incarnate.
When the incarnation or reincarnation agreement that you make with your soul that is being formed in a material body, whatever stage that happens in, right? Because we've had a lot of conversations about when that happens, right? Is it when they're 5? Is it when they're born? You know, when does that happen? We don't, can it happen? Can you lose that at some point and some other entity or some other soul take over?
Well, that was one of the reincarnation cases we talked about. It was like it was later on after the lady was an adult, and then someone incarnated into her body with memories and everything
from a completely previous life.
Yeah, and you would call it possession, and maybe in most cases if it was like some sort of weird demonic entity, but it was like a person who had memories of being on this earth, right?
And but back to this too, right? So like the idea that like when you incarnate, you make an agreement with your higher self. Your higher self is whatever that your soul or your entity or your spirit or your energy, whatever it collapses back to after death, right? Because we all understand that we have these physical bodies that have an expiring date, right? But what is happening in your head, what is happening in your experiences is clearly not just physical.
Is this your interpretation of what he's saying right now? Is that what, or are you trying to elaborate off of what he's saying?
I'm mostly just elaborating off of what he's saying in a sense of like with all the other context I've gathered from all the other topics we've talked about. Like mostly just like making a case for it, I would say.
Is this what this guy is mostly known for? He talks about this kind of topic
He talks about all sorts of stuff. Yeah.
It's mostly questions that he's like, a lot of time you're hearing him responding to a question.
I still don't even know if I believe he's like channeling a real entity or not. But like, I like the things he says are very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I think they're worth some thought. So like,
a lot of it is just coming up with an idea in my head in the moment and like understanding that we don't understand what it is that we're experiencing right now. Nobody does. Science can't tell us. Philosophy can't tell us. Like spirituality and religion can't really tell us. They just give us the ability to have faith. But what it is we're actually experiencing is still up for debate, and we all have the power to like make those definitions ourselves. So that's kind of what I'm doing, is like taking this and putting it in such a context that you can actually understand it to help you with your life, right? Obviously, he's doing that too, but you know, it's all the ability to like contextualize it and like what it means, really. You know,
in this particular instance, I think. He didn't say a ton here. He's really only saying that. So, like, I am pretty heavily leaning towards reincarnation being real at this point in my life. So, if you already believe in reincarnation, then what he's saying isn't really saying much, because you kind of already know that at some point you have to incarnate, right? I guess he's establishing that there's some sort of agreement. And he's sort of establishing that there's a difference between the incarnated you and this like this larger spiritual side of yourself.
The higher self is what he's,
yeah.
Which other spiritual teachings talk about is
but
you have a higher self.
You would presume that if you have any sort of like control over when, where, or how you incarnate, that you're doing it for a reason. Like there's some sort of goal or some sort of reason, some sort of like purpose to why you're doing it, right?
Well, you would hope, yeah. But that doesn't necessarily, like, if we are chaotic too in our, like, in what we experience, right? So it's comforting to assume that whatever your higher self might be is not a chaotic being, and it has a purpose, one singular purpose that it can guide on. But that doesn't mean that that's the only existence either.
Right.
Like your higher self is guiding whatever spiritual like path you're on now. If you were to like just allow yourself to go down that path, doesn't mean that they're any less chaotic. And maybe every incarnation has a completely different theme and completely different agreement. It doesn't necessarily say that every incarnation is going to be the exact same and have the exact same agreement.
Right.
It's like that being, whatever it might be, could be just as chaotic, and there could be multiple levels of this whole thing too, right?
The only thing about it is language that is
that
weird.
There's simulation theory. Like it's a simulation theory idea where you have a higher self, and it's projecting its consciousness onto a physical being, and you're the player, and whatever we are, this physical meat thing is an NPC that you are putting your player into and you're controlling.
Right.
In a sense, whether you have physical control over it or just like the agreement. The agreement is the control.
That would be weird.
Sure, everything's fucking weird.
That's fair.
Good.
Well, we were talking about the video game analogy in the car on the way here.
Because you've been listening to the Jesse Michaels one. All right, I'm gonna link this Jesse Michaels. He interviews Rizwan Virk. The man with the Riz. He doesn't have the Riz. He is
Riz
the Riz. Riz Virk.
What do you guys know about that terminology, Riz?
We know a little bit.
I just know that people use it, and I know the general definition.
We know enough to be.
I think it's a funny word.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Are you embarrassed?
We are the term unk now. You know. Everybody calls everybody unk.
I know.
We are unk now.
You guys were just big bros, and now you're unk status for sure.
For sure.
But anyway, in that, so I'll link that. But in that, he talks about how like spirituality and religion for a long time has used metaphor to try and explain this sort of
the relationship between
the difference between the afterlife, so like the physical life and the spiritual life, right?
Yeah.
And they do their best in whatever language and whatever culture to like explain that all, and then you can kind of update that with modern terminology using this like simulation model.
Well, video game theory too, really.
Right,
it's
but
really
like,
kind of like a video game theory of it.
Right, but like claiming like we live in a simulation even still is actually a little old school. The real way to update it in a way that's most accurate is to say that essentially what we're living in is an MMORPG.
Yeah.
Like imagine like you sit down in front of your computer, you boot up World of Warcraft and you create your character and then you hop in there, right? And like you as the person running that character would be the sort of spiritual entity, and that character would be your physical manifestation, right? And then when you die in game, you just create a new character or restart or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do whatever it is that your heart desires, and then you can go back. It's like playing Assassin's Creed or Red Dead Redemption, right? And there's 2 different paths you can take, or 3 different paths, really, I guess. There's the neutral path where you're not all that good and you're not all that bad, so you just don't get any. But then you can be all good and you get bonuses based on how good you were in your life. And then you can go back and replay it, and you can be really bad where you're just murdering people on the street. And then you come and you actually get perks and bonuses, and also, you know, deterrents to make you not want to be bad, right? But then you can go back and replay it, and you figure out what it is. And I think this is going to segue kind of nicely into our podcast, into what we got lined up here. But what do you got?
Well, wouldn't that theory though, the idea of that everything's so like, for lack of a better word, like everything's so flow in and out of life and death, like wouldn't that make us a lot less afraid of death?
Yeah, it would.
I think it would, and I think it would give us the understanding that death is not the end. So yes, afraid, maybe you're less afraid, but what you do understand is that death has its own challenges, and whatever it is you're going to experience in that state is going to be different from what you're experiencing now.
Right.
So you may never be able to be you in this time with these feelings and these abilities, and you know,
the like, ego self that you call, that I call Dean Glover, right? Like, it's not going to exist in that shape anymore, in that form, with that name,
with those experiences,
with those physical or maybe even mental features, right? Like it will be a different probably existence.
Even if it's the same in all aspects physically for him, it might be different in what is around him.
Just like the MMORPG.
You don't want to lose all your progress from that character.
Yeah, man. Like,
so maybe there's a save game.
My character is this giant orc person and got these big muscles, but like when I like quit the game in real life, I don't got those muscles.
Yeah. But let's think about
I don't have those cool long teeth, and I don't have that cool accent, and I can't speak orcish language. Like,
but maybe
it's all different once I'm out of the game.
But maybe listen to this, right? Let's imagine that same idea. Like you can save that game and you can start a new game. We know we have that ability now. You can have multiple universes going at the same time simultaneously, and you have one player for those.
Go back to your save state.
And guess what? The save state happens when you go to sleep for 8 hours every night.
Oh, dude, in this podcast, there was a moment, and I clipped a bunch of stuff, but I clipped too many things, and I'm not sure which one it is, so I can't pull it up real quick, but maybe I'll look during the break. There was a moment where he was talking about the idea of reincarnation and the idea of near-death experiences.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, it's a really commonly reported thing in near-death experiences to have this sort of, like, life review.
Yeah, right.
Where
we talked about that.
We've talked about life reviews.
Previous episodes, yeah.
Do you know about this life review concept?
Let's talk about it again. You guys don't like talking about the same shit over and over?
No, we can talk about it.
I'm just pointing it out.
The idea is, like, you start to see your life flash before your eyes, but what's different about it is not like you're just replaying in your own head. You are seeing the decisions you made from the other people's perspective, who you affected.
You're seeing what you
like,
think to
Wait,
somebody
didn't you
else
just talk
as
about
if
this in
you
the
were
last
them.
episode?
Yeah, we talked about it
No,
in
you
a
did
few
talk about it a little
episodes.
bit.
Was it last episode? Or
I think we did mention it in the last episode, yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so this idea of the life review.
Because Bashar brings up a lot of that kind of stuff too.
Oh, yeah. So this idea of the life review, what's interesting about it, what Mr. Riz said is he's like, think about it. If there is a life review, what does that imply? That implies that there is memory of everything you ever did in your life. That it's all stored in such a way that it could be recalled. But that means that it has to be saved somehow.
Yeah.
Like it didn't just.
So on what like
Device,
media,
what
what
medium?
what form is all of that information saved in such a way that it could be reviewed at the point of a near-death experience?
Is there a theory of where that is? Of what that
Well,
is?
that's why he's saying it's sort of like the simulation theory. But the simulation theory is really just the modern analogy for like this spiritual life.
Exactly.
This idea that we're coming into this life and this life is not base reality.
It does dive into, though, to answer your question there a bit. In this most recent on Jesse Michaels, he goes into a little bit more of like what our brain's function is in this simulation theory, and that the brain really acts as like the free will engine for this
Collapsing the wave function.
It's always collapsing the wave function. So, and that in that there's a storage of information too. So like the brain, your brain is like we've talked about too in other theories, like the antenna, and it's receiving the information from the mainframe or the server, and the body is more like the client, and it's the quantum computer that's stored elsewhere on a main server, basically. So your body, your experiences, your brain, everything that's happening is happening, and there are other players that you're interacting with, but it's happening frame by frame, and the only thing that's generated for each person.
You're confabulating a couple of the concepts he talked about into one, but what you're saying about the brain, like the brain's role, essentially what they're saying is like the brain is a quantum computer. The brain is a thing that has quantum processes happening in it.
Quantum computer.
And when and like you by observing the world around you, you are changing things from their superposition state to their snap to one position state just by the fact of thinking, just by the fact of observing. And that the brain is a quantum process that is responsible for collapsing that wave function. And so that us players, quote unquote, in this game, we are sort of creating the game as we go.
Right.
Because everything is just in a quantum superposition of all possibilities until we go through
And
our
observe
life
things.
living it.
Well, and that's the thing. There has to be a framework for it still, because even like the idea of like everything is possible all at once, like there still has to be unless you're going to say that everybody is an NPC and you're the only PC around, like controlling everything, like there has to be an agreement where all of these different brains are hooked up to, and it has to be an understanding that we're all simulating something so similar, and we make these agreements based on what we're seeing in the world together.
They had a really interesting section talking about like NPCs, and talking about how like you can and are born into a world where you can make choices, you can be present, you can be active, you can choose this, you can choose that, you can build a life that you want to create, right?
Right.
Or you can step back and you can let societies and you can let other people's opinions and you can let other things and you can let your own subconscious just go into autopilot, and you can turn your own self into an NPC by not being involved.
Well, and that's where you can go conspiratorial with it too. Like
that's what they're trying to make us.
If you take on this worldview, then you are almost like allowing yourself to like realize that the majority of what you're seeing or could potentially be seeing is NPCs and a world created to create NPCs. and to create people who are just like allow, and like if like taking like the Matrix metaphor of like everything is a programmed thing, and your experience from birth would be programmed so that you see the world as completely one way. But it isn't until you allow yourself to see the code that is being written that you actually understand that what is happening is a subject to like imagination. Like the world is happening around you, but you're only seeing what it is that you're programmed to see.
The more NPCs there are, the easier it is to be in charge of the game as the main character or whatever you call it.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is if we're all main characters, if there's a ton of main characters, turning people into NPCs is a good way of controlling a large majority of the actual server base of people, and you can make it where you want. But there doesn't mean that there's not other player characters trying to make change and trying to infuse what it is that, and even. Even player characters who don't actually see behind, right? Like player characters who understand that they want to live the life, and they take advantage of the fact that there are NPCs too.
You don't have to understand what the actual
game is to take advantage of the NPCs,
right?
Or to game the system in your advantage, and you can have your own
live a free life, even
right. And that's why you see a lot of these like groups where you have like one leader who maybe he's the guy who's like, I see through all this crap, and I can like basically just make people believe what I want them to believe. And that's why you see cults and, you know, religions and all these other things popping up around the world that are meant to control people in mass.
I was going larger and more conspiracy with it. Like,
well, of course you can go larger, but I'm saying like even at the small level, that's what can happen.
Like all these
things, you see it with the cults and stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
All these things that are meant to like lull us to sleep and make us go with the flow.
Well, yeah, that ties into the fact that
trying to like NPCs, coax us into NPC mode so that they can do whatever they want to do and we won't have anything to say about it.
Yeah, because you won't even see what it is that they're trying to hide anymore.
Interesting. All right, well, let's take our first break here.
That sounds
this is a song by my nephew Chris Glover.
Let's go.
Trace that heart of mine, or giggle as you pump that wine. Your joy is so full, our hearts intertwine. When you stare into my eyes, I whisper white lies. Oh yeah, I realize this is the way I'm supposed to feel. But to be honest, it feels too real. We always romanticize, but now that this time's mine, if that was her goal.
It wasn't. Give her the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, from the source. From the source.
That song was recorded on the microphone I cannot get working tonight for Chris.
It had one task in its life.
Chris, I need to lay this idea out, all right? So during our break.
Yeah,
during our break.
All right.
Chris, give us a. So Chris was talking about an idea he's been doing with a buddy of his. And they've been on YouTube now, right? You guys got some posts now?
No, they haven't launched yet.
Okay, so they haven't launched yet, but they've got this idea for...
Let Chris talk for himself.
I was trying to lay the premise, and then I can introduce him to talk about it, Dean.
All right, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
Drew is such a soothing, like, jazz talk show voice, though, so it sounds better coming from him. But anyways...
If you want to hear it from him.
No, I was just laying the groundwork to introduce Chris onto it.
We're in the pre-launch stage of a dream that me and my buddy had about creating a game. We had to snag an Instagram name, but that's the only like actual contextual thing that we've done for it. But we've recorded 3 weeks of content. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we're creating a game. We're leaning towards board game, but we're also big sport guys. So who knows? It could turn into something. And Drew was...
So we were spitballing some ideas, and we were talking about how exciting it is to like even think about like what it is to make
an idea for a game.
I have an idea for the premise of a game, right? So you were saying some sort of sport game, but also like board game. Dean had some ideas for an integrating a board game with some sort of sports tabletop game or something, some sort of card game or like some sort of chance along with like an actual physical thing you could be doing. So my idea was just right off the top. Was doing some sort of like, you know, the little paper football game where you got a little paper triangle and you're flicking it through and you're trying to hit field goals. So instead of that, you have a little bit longer table, maybe not a shuffleboard size, but a little bit longer table. And you have different things that you can land on. There is a field goal. So if you want to just go for the field goal, you can get the guaranteed points.
This sounds literally
just... If you land on different spots on the table, you get different things. You can flip different cards, and maybe one of the cards is like a fantasy football card in a sense where you have like a person. So you have like Justin Jefferson just hit a 73-yard touchdown.
And so you can do your next shot from 73 yards forward on the game table.
And you get a different amount of points based on where you're landing. So the advantage is you're trying to land on specific cards, so it's a little bit harder to land on. But you can get the guaranteed points by just flicking the field goal like you would do in any paper football game to get points. Those are the guaranteed points. But if you want crazy extra points to like put your team ahead, you land on these cards that give you different... outcomes,
but there's a risk to it because if you miss it, then you didn't get the chance of the 3 points
for a field goal or whatever.
But that's only if you turn it over. If you can get down the field a little bit and then you hit fourth down, maybe you still go for the kick.
Yeah, you can still go for the big play.
So you get like a 20-yard field or 20-yard catch from Travis Kelce or whatever, right? You land on that card, and then you're a little bit closer to get the field goal. And if you go, so like maybe you would do like a shuffleboard size table. Where it's like you're hanging out in a bar and you're hanging out with your buddies and you got this like dope paper football game that like has everything like integrated into the table.
I love this. I
mean, obviously this is like...
Do you think there's a way to make that portable and make it more mobile?
Yeah, you put cards on a table. So you put a couple of tables together, right? Like instead of putting up a beer pong table, you could just say this table back here is to flick from. So you have a certain distance between two tables. Mm-hmm. So you can do that. You can get two tables.
Yeah. Go most places. It's a card game.
So you put cards down on a thing, and you try to land it on the cards, or you go for the guaranteed.
And then a little plastic field goal, and
you put like a little plastic field goal in a box, or you can just have people do it and just have like certain like agreement that it's elbows on the table and whatever.
That's good for like if you lose pieces, because that's always a problem with games if you lose pieces.
You put directions in for the people who are guaranteed to lose the pieces, which are people who are going to be playing this game.
Dude, I love board games. So are you leaning more towards like a board game or like a sporty game?
It's just that we're both like dudes that grew up with like dreams of being professional like athletes, right? And so like we want a game that we can actually beat those NBA, NFL players in, and where they'll be like, I'm a fucking professional. Why can't I beat this fucking kid? Like I want to be able to have that satisfaction, but I also want it to be a universal game that you can play with the family and you can still get that competitive itch satisfied. Kind of like Skull King, right? Like you can make it as complex as you want it. And we also want it to be mobile. We want it to be so mobile and universal that
you can just like carry it in your glove.
That you go to the freaking airport, instead of people sitting there bored on their phones, there's a bunch of people playing a bunch of games. Like we want it to be like freaking revolutionary.
I would say one thing would be like some sort of like QR code game that's like a quick mobile app, because obviously that's the most mobile.
That
if you're gonna go mobile, you guarantee that you don't have to carry anything or maybe forget something, right? If it's even if it's a pack of cards, you could imagine.
Well, that's what I'm saying. As long as it's like a pack of cards or something, it's pretty easy.
It's easy for sure. Cards would be the easiest outside of what I'm saying. So the QR code like mobile game would be one thing, but or even just something like so simple that you can like have like a credit card.
If we use
it comes out in like pieces or something.
Dude, if we use too much technology, we're gonna lose your audience because you guys are old as shit and you're not gonna know how to do it.
I'll play it.
Dean, you remember the idea you had for creating an app too? The game? Remember the Nightmare Chess thing?
Oh yeah,
dude, we talked about making an app too, like a game.
My friend G-Man introduced me to this game called Nightmare Chess. So it's chess, but you have these physical playing cards, and you split them up before the game.
So fucking fun. And
you can play a card before you go, and it will change the way that the chess rules play.
Interesting.
And so there's some that's like a hurricane and like everyone gets pushed off to the side by one square, and if someone falls off the end of the board, they're out.
No shit.
Yeah,
it's fucking awesome.
That sounds so fun.
It's crazy. There's ones that like give your king the ability to move 2 times instead of only 1 move, or like giving different pieces extra like powers,
or like the one that can go diagonal across the board and then it continues on the other side of the board.
Yeah, like you can do wrap around.
Wrap around.
Yeah.
Or you switch sides and turn the board around.
I don't know. That seems like it wouldn't make sense though.
That's what I'm saying. You do like a tabletop sports game, but you use like Nightmare Chess style cards to like change the rules as you go.
That's the biggest thing I think is that's gonna be cool is that it's literally just 2 Joe Schmoes. Like literally, this is not our realm of professionalism, and we had a dream, and we're just gonna see what happens.
See it out, man.
Yeah,
I'm interested. I want to see how that goes.
Yeah,
it'd be cool.
You gotta hide our logo in your game art somewhere.
Actually,
Easter egg.
That's funny you guys said that. My buddy, his name's Jason. Shout out Jason. He's my partner, not my love partner.
I got you, bro. You made it
my
weird.
Game partner. I love him though. We could be love partners.
This is why you're not Riz.
Damn.
I don't think you used that right, but
no, well, you're not the guy Riz. We listened to it earlier.
Well,
roast him.
Okay. Anyways, Jason, my
lover,
is a huge fan of Easter eggs and puns and stuff like that. So there's definitely gonna be stuff like that hidden throughout the game.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be so cool.
All right,
man,
cool.
I'm excited for that. And I want to.
Did you say what the name was you guys have right now?
Oh yeah, I want to hear that.
It's not too important because we're not fully launched yet. But
okay,
I can. Yeah.
Would you just say it? It's
house rules. House rules, but you know we like to make our own house rules, including the way you spell rules. So it's
censored.
House rules.
Yeah.
Be fun. Enough about me. Can we watch this freaking video?
Let's do it. Let's move on. Thanks for telling us about your I'm
excited.
More collabs to come.
I may edit out your spelling of that just so you can have time to get all your ducks in a row. You don't want anyone out there stealing your names.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh shit.
All right.
We'll edit it out. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So let's go into this video. This is the channel Agrippa's Diary. So here will be a link to the video. Check this guy's stuff out. He does a lot of videos about like occult topics, like magic and like weird religion and old stuff. Anyway, this is like a AI remastering of Alan Watts talking about Carl Jung.
He's made a couple books, hasn't he?
Alan Watts?
Yeah.
Oh, he's big. Yeah, like he's huge. You can find his stuff all over.
Wait, hold on. What's his like his biggest topic or like his main? Does he have like a book that's like outdone others?
I don't know the answer to that. We can ask ChatGPT.
Ooh, I love when you guys bring out the robot.
Did you like the episode we interviewed it?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a fun one, and we need to do that again. We're trying to work out getting it to do like different like sound or different like voice modulation and stuff.
I want you to get it to fall in love with you.
Dean's probably already got a date. I don't know. Dean's been deep into AI.
It's fun to mess with. All right. He's got a book called The Way of Zen. Yeah, he's like a writer, speaker.
Zen.
I've only ever heard him talk.
So it's mostly
Yeah,
spirituality.
he does a lot of lectures. Yeah,
I've listened to like audio from him. I haven't read any of his books.
Wait, go back to the first one, the Zen. Buddhism.
Yeah. Explains one of his best known works, The Way of Zen. This book introduces Zen Buddhism and explains its historical roots, practices, and philosophies in an accessible way. Anyway, so let's go to this video.
Let's go.
Tell me to stop it if you want to talk about something.
And it was Jung who helped me to remind myself that I was, by upbringing and by tradition,
No, just kidding.
and I couldn't escape from my own cultural conditioning, and that this inability to escape was not a kind of prison, but was the endowment of one's being with certain capacities like one's arms and legs and mouth and teeth and brain, which could always be used constructively. And I feel it's for this reason that I have always remained for myself in the position of the comparative philosopher, wanting to balance East and West rather than to go overboard with enthusiasm for exotic imports. But there are aspects of Jung's work far beyond this that I want to discuss. And first of all, I want to call attention to one fundamental principle that underlay all his work and that was most extraordinarily exemplified in Jung himself as a person. And this is what I would call his recognition of the polarity of life. That is to say, his resistance to what is to my mind the disastrous and absurd hypothesis that there is in this universe a radical and absolute conflict between good and evil, light and darkness, that can never, never, never be harmonized. This conflict has come up to us in a very vivid way in recent days with the trial of Adolf Eichmann. And it's interesting, too, that certain people accused Jung also of Nazi sympathies, because he, too, would not subscribe to the absolute state of a war between good and evil, going down to the very roots of the universe. Obviously, when certain crimes and catastrophes occur, human emotions are deeply and rightly aroused. And I would, for myself, say that were I in any situation where an Eichmann was operating, I would be roused to a degree of fury that I can hardly imagine in my present existence, but I know it would come out from me. I would oppose those sorts of villainies with all the energy that I have, And if I was trapped in such a situation, I would fight it to the end. But at the same time, I would recognize the relativity of my own emotional involvement. I would know that I was fighting a man like Eichmann in the same way, shall we say, as a spider and a wasp, insects which naturally prey upon one another and fight one another, do so. But as a human being, I would not be able to regard my adversary as a metaphysical devil. That is to say, as one who represented the principle of absolute and unresolvable evil. And I think this is the most important thing in Jung, that he was able to point out that to the degree that you condemn others and find evil in others, you are to that degree unconscious of the same thing in yourself, or at least of the potentiality of it. There can be Eichmanns and Hitlers and Himmlers just because there are people who are unconscious.
You said you're unconscious to that thing in yourself. Is that kind of like the projections thing we were talking about earlier? Like the evil that you see in someone is something that you are unconscious within yourself?
It's kind of a reflection of what you're projecting into the world, right? So like what you're seeing and what draws your attention is usually something that is inspired by something that you're either working on or seeing within yourself, and you're wanting to like find
or
an
at least
answer
the
to.
potential of it. Like
right. It's like a recognition of that potential in yourself, whether it's something you've acted on or have ever acted on. It's more of an understanding that you're acknowledging that is something that you are capable of.
Or at least there's a reason why you're drawn to it.
Well, yeah, and I think that in most people, and maybe in certain circumstances, maybe more of one thing and more of another in other circumstances, right? Like if you're in a situation where you're with loved ones, you're going to feel more of the loving type of things. But then if you're in a situation where your life is on the line, you can see yourself acting in a certain way to protect yourself and your loved ones that you would have never expected of yourself in other situations. You know what I'm saying? If you're put in a situation where it's your and your family's life, that's one way that an average person can see themselves acting in such a way that they would have condemned a second before that. Right. It's just the realization that in order to be what it is that we are, you have to admit and acknowledge that you're capable and you have the ability to do the things that you condemn.
Right.
In order to survive.
There is something in you that could, like, there is a possible layout of the world in which you could have been put in a position where you could do something that you're seeing and condemning.
Right, and it's kind of as simple as like
you know
yourself in somebody
you're
else's
capable
shoes.
of the same thing, which is why you're condemning it in a way.
That's why you see the like walk a mile in my shoes, right? Like you could, if you are truly empathetic and you can see yourself in other people's situations and empathize for their position, like you can understand that if put in the same set of circumstances, really, if you really get down to the root of it and you put yourself down to like what it could be that somebody else is experiencing, you can see yourself doing a lot of the things that other people do.
What you said, Dean, you said because you see it in yourself that you could do it. So are you saying, is your belief or observation of what he's saying here, are you saying that because you know that it's a choice that you make, that you're judging it or condemning it?
I'd say it's more that the ability to recognize evil and wrongdoing in others, what he's talking about, is the ability to recognize that comes from you already previous in your life having learned of your own ability to wrongdoing. And even if you haven't done the thing that you're condemning in someone, you can recognize the potential
for having done that
in yourself based on the other wrongdoings you've done. You take a wrongdoing
rationalize.
you've done, and then you add the circumstances that take someone up to like a
And the
crazy
rationale.
extreme. And you could see a world in which you could do it. Even though you are, that's why you're condemning it, because you kind of understand like what it would take to get you there, and you're like, dang, like
it would take a
I'm
lot.
condemning this. You know what I mean?
But really what you're condemning is the fact that something can get you there in reality, right? Like you're not.
That's
like,
the interesting
that's
part
the thing,
about
like,
where this video is
you
going to go.
understand
With
that
like, what do you
it
do
could
with
put
that?
anybody in that situation. So really, what you're condemning in that situation is that there are things that can put you in a situation of that sort to have to make that choice.
Riz.
All right, let's keep going.
There can be Eichmanns and Hitlers and Himmlers just because there are people who are unconscious of their own dark sides, and they project that darkness outward into, say, Jews or communists or whatever the enemy may be, and say, there is the darkness, it is not in me, and therefore because the darkness is not in me, I am justified in annihilating this enemy, whether it be with atom bombs or gas chambers or whatnot. But to the degree that a person becomes conscious that the evil is as much in himself as in the other, to this same degree he is not likely to project it onto some scapegoat and commit the most criminal acts of violence upon other people. Now this is to me the primary thing that Jung saw, that in order to admit and really accept and understand the evil in oneself, one had to be able to do it without being an enemy to it. As he put it, you had to accept your own dark side. And he had this preeminently in his own character. I had a long talk with him back in 1958, and I was enormously impressed with a man who was obviously very great, but at the same time, with whom everyone could be completely at ease. There are so many great people, great in knowledge or great in what is called holiness, with whom the ordinary individual feels rather embarrassed. He feels inclined to sit on the edge of his chair and to feel immediately judged by this person's wisdom or sanctity. Jung managed to have wisdom, and I think also sanctity, in such a way that when other people came into its presence, they didn't feel judged. They felt enhanced, encouraged, and invited to share in a common life. And there was a sort of twinkle in Jung's eye that gave me the impression that he knew himself to be just as much a villain as everybody else. There's a nice German word, Hintergedanke, which means a thought in the very far, far back of your mind. Jung had a Hintergedanke in the back of his mind, which showed in the twinkle in his eye. It showed that he knew and recognized what I've sometimes called the element of irreducible rascality in himself. And he knew it so strongly and so clearly, and in a way so lovingly, that he would not condemn the same thing in others, and therefore would not be led into those thoughts, feelings, and acts of violence towards others, which are always characteristic of the people who project the devil in themselves upon the outside, upon somebody else, upon the scapegoat.
Yeah. Whew.
Bruh.
I just said that shit.
Yeah. Yeah, we just laid that out.
So
Yeah, I
the
mean,
greater, he's essentially saying the greater your ability to recognize the fact that you have done, you can do your potential for evil. You see that darkness in yourself and you recognize it and you accept it as part of you. The greater your ability to do that, the less likely you are
to
lash out in violence at someone else who you see something similar in.
It's this idea of like it's just like, I don't know what the term is for it, but it's like this like hyper masculinity in a sense of like being so capable physically of being able to dominate most people, like being so trained and being so like ready for all situations, having jiu-jitsu skills, having gun skills, having all these things to be able to protect yourself, having all those things being in place, and like just like knowledge too, like being smart enough to like outwit the next guy, right? And like just being completely prepared is that same thing, like being so prepared for all of the evils that could befall you, training because you know that those things are out there, but getting yourself into a place where you like are just ready to react to anything gives you the ultimate security, because you are able to be nice to everybody and you're always ready for the worst thing, but you're able to be nice to everybody because you're so prepared and you're so ready. You have nothing to fear. So you face the world in such a way that, I don't know if it's masculine, but it's just like preparedness, and like this is like in the physical world, but obviously this is meant to be more like spiritual and like minded, like change your mindset too. But physically, like a lot of people have this same kind of motto where they're just like hyper prepared for every situation, and it like gives them the same kind of mantra of like being so prepared and so ready to tackle anything, that it gives you the security to be nice and to like do good because you are ready for all the evil to happen. So you're just projecting, I don't know. It's like a mindset thing. It's interesting.
I feel like this is almost promoting or inviting sympathy towards heinous acts.
I understand what you're saying there. The
Definitely
reason I think, I think the going further into video will like round it out.
Yeah,
but in a way, like the problem with violence and doing evil is a lot of time a person can do evil without being evil, right? But when evil is done to you, it demands a response. And so you answer evil with evil, but then evil happens over here, and so they answer with evil, and then, you know, like it can become this never-ending chain.
The thing is,
right?
You can have.
It's not to say that the evil wasn't evil. That's not what he's trying to say. He's not trying to say that doing evil behavior is not evil. What he's trying to say is that because you understand that if you can understand that you are capable of that evil, it can help you to understand the evil coming from others, and that can help you to respond with less violence.
That's what I meant by that, is like,
and less violence doesn't promote more violence, right? Like you're stopping that cycle.
Yeah.
So you think this is leading to a method of de-escalation? You think that's what he's kind of leading up to here? What do you guys?
I think it's kind of an inherent de-escalation in a sense of like, if the majority of people like realize or understand that they are capable of exactly that, they have a confidence built into that. Once you have that actual understanding, there's a confidence that you know you're not alone, and like other people are like, I don't know, like the idea that you are capable of those same things gives you a confidence that you collectively, in response to somebody acting that way, you would have to inherently act a way that you wouldn't like to enforce a certain thing on somebody. If somebody's going around killing people, as for example, right? Like you have to go after that person and you may have to like take him out in order to stop the threat.
Yeah.
Right.
So that inherently, that conflict is admitting the capability. Like you have to do certain things in order to react to certain things. That's like a basic level of it, but I think like inherently, like it's the same idea.
I know it feels like I'm playing devil's advocate.
No,
that's
I think
good,
that was a
though.
really
That's good,
intelligent question.
Yes, it feels like you guys are very comfortable with this guy. Are you guys really familiar with his stuff? Because you guys are like, it's almost like you guys are like ready to reinforce whatever he's saying because you guys inherently agree with whatever he's saying.
I think he's being very insightful. I'm not 100% sure if I do necessarily agree with everything he's saying.
Yeah, no.
But
we entertain
the way
ideas,
he's talking about it and the way he's explaining things are intelligent, and you can see his thought pattern, and it's worthwhile to like take it in and like try it on and like see where it can go, where its shortcomings are, right?
Well, and obviously this was a conversation had in 1958. So what's being said, you can take what information you need from it without accepting the underlying tone of the conversation being had here or what's being portrayed. Like you have to understand that this
Exposure
is an individual
is
with
not
a tone
acceptance
of his own. Like, yeah, exactly. Just listening to words and reacting to it doesn't mean that we just immediately prescribe to everything this guy's saying.
Right.
But we're able to. He is still insightful in a way that humans interact and human psychology has developed.
Like for instance,
You know?
if you're in the army and back in World War II and you're fighting the Nazis and you're in a battle and you see them employ some sort of technology, like you know they're evil, but you also know they're smart, and you like see that they're employing something that like you don't understand, and you can learn from them. And like just because they're like, even on the extreme where like you're fighting against someone in a war, like you can still learn, right? And so I'm not saying he's that for us, but like I'm just saying like even in the extreme, if you can learn, like if you disagree, you can definitely learn.
Yeah, knowledge is power, and you guys really value intellect. So I'm noticing that is what's happening. That's all.
But to be like more direct, like there are a lot of things he's saying here that I think I agree with right now. I'm not 100% sure, but I think I agree with a lot of this stuff, or at least some of it. I do think all people are born with the capacity for good and the capacity for evil. Mm-hmm. And I think certain things that can happen in your life, like if a freaking bomb comes down and blows up half your family and just destroys your life and you can never go forward the same again, it will absolutely affect the way you move forward in the future. And it will change the acts that you're capable of, right? Mm-hmm. And we have to understand that. And we have to it's easier to understand that if you can imagine it happening to you and see yourself acting with that same level of violence and anger and what could be out of context on the other side seen as just evil.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. I'm excited to see how he closes this out.
Yeah, me too. All right, let's take another break. We're a little bit over here. Yep. This is Stevie Nader's called Take You On.
Finally, some real music.
I've been caught in a storm before. You turned and said to me I was out past the shore, sailing towards a dream, and I promised myself that I never sail one step off my coast, coast, coast. Among the things to say, among the things to say, among the things to say, among the things to say. knocking at the wooden exit door, 'cause it was you that I was waiting for. Yeah, that was me standing on the shore and knocking at the wooden exit door, 'cause it was you that I was waiting for. For I would take you on, I 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 take you on.
Welcome back. All right, segment 3. Let's keep this video going, or
Yeah.
Please.
I'm gonna back it up a few seconds.
Into those thoughts, feelings, and acts of violence towards others, which are always characteristic of the people who project the devil in themselves upon the outside, upon somebody else, upon the scapegoat. Now, this made Jung a very integrated
Go on,
character.
pause that.
In
Oh,
other
sorry.
words,
So, like, going back to like what we had talked about at the end of that last segment, just because it sparked it, like the idea of like it's the scapegoat, right? You're projecting that devil of what you're seeing on to another person. That's kind of like talking about like how like you're seeing your rage. And I get it, right? So like maybe the example is like seeing your entire village burn down. But what you're not seeing is what it took to get to that point. You're just seeing your emotions in the moment. So like
Right, but he, as far as the projecting goes, he's saying
yeah.
Let's keep it going, because
Okay.
he's gonna
All right.
flesh this out more.
Okay.
now, this made Jung a very integrated character. In other words, here I have to present a little bit of a complex idea. He was a man who was thoroughly with himself. Having seen and accepted his own nature profoundly, he had a kind of unity and absence of conflict in his own nature, which had to it this additional complication that I find so fascinating. He was the sort of man who could feel anxious and afraid and guilty without being ashamed of feeling this way. In other words, he understood that an integrated person is not a person who simply eliminated the sense of guilt or the sense of anxiety from his life, who's fearless and wooden and kind of sage of stone. He's a person who feels all these things, but has no recrimination against himself for feeling them. And this is, to my mind, a profound kind of humor.
Dang, that was some bars right there. So yeah, you're not the person.
He's not the person who's in.
Yeah, he's saying
his
about
mind,
Jung.
yeah.
He's not a type of person who would be upset with himself for feeling negative feelings. Like, he understands that part of being human is you're going to feel these negative feelings, right? Like, he's the type of person who accepts that he will feel these things. And if you can
doesn't
be the
reject
type of
it.
person who accepts that can change the way you interact with the world, right?
Well, it seems so plain too.
It's just a man that sounds so at peace. Like he's able to really just release and let go of even the deepest, darkest feelings that he's having. And what does integrated person mean? You're saying like like they're describing like the most ideal person. They're saying integrated person. What is that?
I think he's integrating with his feelings, right? Like the
Okay,
idea
so
of like
like an
integrating.
emotionally.
Integrating is putting two things together.
You're
Or two or
attaching
more
your
things together.
logical
You're taking
and
things and
your,
you're attaching them.
So
You're
is he-
integrating them.
So
he's integrating his logical mind with his like his left and his right brains, almost like his feelings and his
Or his light
logic.
side and his dark side. Like
that's what
he
I mean.
understands he's got those
Logic
dark
is
feelings. He's
is a big part of
integrating
that,
them
too.
and he's not being upset with himself for having dark feelings.
Yep.
But it sounds like Alan Watts is insinuating.
Deifying. He's deifying Jung in a sense there.
Yeah, well, he's saying that being integrated or balanced is what I'm getting out of it. Is the ideal way to be, right?
Well, he's at least describing Jung as that in a manner in which it is
Pertinent for this
is lifting
idea.
it up as an ideal of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, let's keep it going.
You know, in humor, there's always a certain element of malice. There was a talk given on the Pacifica stations just a little while ago, which was an interview with Al Cap. And Al Cap made the point that he felt that all humor was fundamentally malicious. Now, there's a very high kind of humor, which is humor at oneself. A real humor is not jokes at the expense of others. It's always jokes at the expense of oneself, and of course it has an element of malice in it. It has malice towards oneself, the recognition of the fact that behind the social role that you assume, behind all your pretensions to being either a good citizen or a fine scholar or a great scientist or a leading politician or physician or whatever you happen to be, but behind this facade there is a certain element of the unreconstructed bum, not as something to be condemned and wailed over, but as something to be recognized as contributive to one's greatness and to one's positive aspect in the same way that manure is contributive to the perfume of the rose.
Bro.
I resonate with that.
Yeah. I mean, it does sound in one sense to be like, especially with like oneself, like the idea of oneself too, like the politicians or like really like smart people, like they are like really achieving high things, but they can also have this like dark side, like their personal self, that like when they're not doing the great deeds that they're portrayed as doing, they have a dark side that can also be
Right, but he's
whether that's, like,
talking about the
internal or
recognition that dark side is contributive to you in the same way that the manures contributed to the scent of a rose. That is a sick line.
Exactly.
I mean, it makes sense in a way. Like if you are a person who went through a terrible and horrible and like painful past, that's that manure that can contribute to the scent of your rose. You know what I mean?
But you have to accept it as manure to understand that it's manure. Like he's saying,
Right.
self-deprecation humor is like
Right.
a way of understanding that you accept it and you appreciate it.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah.
To others in a social environment if you're being humorous about it, right?
Dude, you have to be so socially aware to understand that in that situation, like using self-deprecation humor is not only are you contributing to the social environment, but it's almost contributing to like your self journey and like, dude, this guy's
can be.
You know who that makes me think of? Dad. Our dad has one of the best sense of humors of any like human being I've ever met. He understands like dark humor. He understands super like innocent humor. He likes dad jokes. He likes like anything in the realm of humor. He gets it. Mm-hmm. I've never like been able to show him a joke. He's like, what?
Yeah.
Like he gets it.
Yeah.
You know?
He knows how to laugh at himself and
He knows how to laugh at himself. He is like, That's how he entertained us as kids. Like, he would just be stupid. He would do dumb things, and he would make himself look stupid. He would like fall, trip, blah. Chris has this saying, "Grandpa, fall down, fix it."
That was Jordan.
Oh, that was Jordan.
Jordan.
Yeah, that was Jordan.
Like, that's our, like, you know, like, that's the epitome of humor at yourself. Like, you fall down just to make a child laugh. Right.
Oh, and you fix it. You fall down and you fix it. Come on, Jordan. Jordan's so wise. God. Jordan and Alan Watts are on the same page right now.
They're on the same level, for sure. I agree.
The self-deprecating humor, that's powerful, man.
Yeah. Let's
All
keep
right.
going.
In the same way that manure is contributive to the perfume of the rose. Jung saw this and Jung accepted this. And I want to read a passage from one of his lectures, which I think is one of the greatest things he ever wrote, and which has been a very marvelous thing for me. It was in a lecture delivered to a group of clergy in Switzerland a considerable number of years ago. And he writes as follows. People forget that even doctors have moral scruples, and that certain patients' confessions are hard even for a doctor to swallow. Yet the patient does not feel himself accepted, unless the very worst in him is accepted too. No one can bring this about by mere words. It comes only through reflection, and through the doctor's attitude towards himself and his own dark side. If the doctor wants to guide another, or even accompany him a step of the way, he must feel with that person's psyche. He never feels it when he passes judgment. Whether he puts his judgments into words or keeps them to himself makes not the slightest difference. To take the opposite position and to agree with the patient offhand is also of no use. Feeling comes only through unprejudiced objectivity. This sounds almost like a scientific precept, and it could be confused with a purely intellectual, abstract attitude of mind. But what I mean is something quite different. It is a human quality, a kind of deep respect for the facts, for the man who suffers from them, and for the riddle of such a man's life. The truly religious person has this attitude. He knows that God has brought all sorts of strange and inconceivable things to pass, and seeks in the most curious ways to enter a man's heart. He therefore senses in everything the unseen presence of the divine will. This is what I mean by unprejudiced objectivity. It is a moral achievement on the part of the doctor, who ought not to let himself be repelled by sickness and corruption. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. And I am the oppressor of the person I condemn, not his friend and fellow sufferer. I do not in the least mean to say that we must never pass judgment when we desire to help and improve. But if the doctor wishes to help a human being, he must be able to accept him as he is. And he can do this in reality only when he has already seen and accepted himself as he is. Perhaps this sounds very simple, but simple things are always the most difficult. In actual life, it requires the greatest art to be simple, and
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, how can you be a doctor? How can you help someone? How can you, like, be the person who's meant to help someone if you can't accept them where they're at?
Yeah. That's what I was getting at too before. It's like the idea that these doctors and these people who are meant to do like the greatest good, and like they have to accept the fact that doom and gloom is what they are working in.
Right.
They see the worst aspects of human life, like these first responders and these people who have to deal with the darkest sides of what happens on the streets of our cities and towns. Like, they see death and destruction all the time. They have to be, and a lot of times that's why you see these like high, you know, self-inflicted you know, deaths in those sorts of jobs is because they are have to grapple with this, whether they are willing to spiritually or not, or like outside of their job, right? Like if they're just in like are not have the ability to grapple with that side of humanity, like it can be very devastating for their psyche, right? And like the ability to accept that aspect of humanity gives them the ability to do the most good, because they have the ability to understand
in order
it at a
to
fundamental
accept
level.
it in humanity, you have to accept it in yourself.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So they have to see it in themselves. That's just a phase, right? That's what I mean by like having the ability to go into the fire when people are burning alive. You have to understand that that is a part of life, and that you might have to experience, and you are experiencing it in that moment. So you have to be willing to do that, or a mass murder or whatever it might be, where a detective or a police officer or a paramedic is going in to save people's lives. They have to be willing to accept the fact that that could happen to them, or they could be on whatever end of that situation might be, right?
Yeah, it could happen
The person
to them.
who does the harm, the person who is receiving the harm, the person who is responding to the harm, obviously, like that, they are the people who like in daily life we can look to and be like, these people are having to address these things on a daily level, like on a daily, every day they're dealing with these things.
Like these doctors, their profession makes it so that they're not in those types of situations, right? But they have to be able.
Well, they still are, yeah.
But
life and death.
Well, I just mean like
aftermath,
like the victims or the patients that they're dealing with, right? Whatever
it's still
situation.
Life and death, but yeah, still.
It's just those doctors, if they have that kind of that ego or that pretentious of like higher standard or higher being, they're not putting themselves down. They're not being realistic with themselves. They're not putting themselves in a vulnerable state of understanding that could be them as well.
Professionally, but like personally, they might be doing that kind of deep dive, right? Imagine going home after like a massive event where you had to like do like 10 surgeries or something, and you had to like, you maybe saved 5 out of 10 people that night as a surgeon. And the 5 people are the ones that the 5 people who died are the ones that haunt you, because you're like, you have to grapple with the fact that their life was in your hands. Like you had the capability or at least the understanding of maybe like saving them. So you had to understand, like there was some understanding that your psyche had to go through during that process, whether you suppressed it or not during the actual like thing. Later on, it's going to come back, and your brain's never going to forget that.
What a hard job.
All right, let's take our next break here.
Doctor.
Yeah.
This is TJ McNulty. The song is called Moment. Enjoy.
Take a moment.
Both our emotions. And can we take a moment to reflect upon these thoughts we thought about, these feelings of regret? Well, that we might miss a good thing, a thing that might pass us up while we are both watching the days go by and these feelings grow apart. We'll say goodbye to the emotions in our heart. We'll gather knowledge and maybe we will see that we were too all the sweat and tears that's forced into this relationship through these last couple of years. And can we take a moment to realize that you and I are just a phase in a series through our lives? 'Cause you'll change and I'll be that one guess who love you while it lasts, and guess a privilege to see the days go by and these feelings grow apart. We'll say goodbye to the emotions in our heart. We'll gather wisdom and maybe we will see that we were too young to read love, and this wasn't meant to be. We are too young to be in love, and this wasn't meant to be.
Goddamn.
Hell yeah, TJ. Hell yeah, TJ.
All right, let's get back into Alan Watts talking about Jung. Here we go.
In actual life, it requires the greatest art to be simple, and so acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem and the acid test of one's whole outlook on life. That I feed the beggar, that I forgive an insult, that I love my enemy in the name of Christ, all these are undoubtedly great virtues. What I do unto the least of my brethren, that I do unto Christ. But what if I should discover that the least amongst them all, the poorest of all beggars, the most impudent of all offenders, yea, the very fiend himself, that these are within me, and that I myself stand in need of the alms of my own kindness? That I myself am the enemy who must be loved, what then? Then, as a rule, the whole truth of Christianity is reversed. There is then no more talk of love and long-suffering. We say to the brother within us, Raka, and condemn and rage against ourselves. We hide him from the world. We deny ever having met this least among the lowly in ourselves, and had it been God himself who drew near to us in this despicable form, we should have denied him 1,000 times before a single cock had crowed.
Pause that. Damn.
You see what he's saying?
Yeah, he's talking about how, like, once you realize that the problems are within you, the instinctual is to, like, start blaming.
Yeah. Well, to start hiding that part of yourself,
and hiding
denying
it. Deep as part of, like,
but part of that hiding it is seeing it and pointing it out in others.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, you may think the metaphors rather strong, but I feel that they are not so needlessly. This is a very, very forceful passage, and a memorable one in all Jung's works, trying to heal this insanity from which our culture in particular has suffered, of thinking that a human being can become hale, healthy, and holy by being divided against himself in inner conflict, paralleling the conception of a cosmic conflict between an absolute good and an absolute evil, which cannot be reduced to any prior and underlying unity. In other words, our rage, and our very proper rage, against evil things which occur in this world, must not overstep itself. For if we require as a justification for our rage a fundamental and metaphysical division between good and evil, we have an insane and, in a certain sense, schizophrenic universe, of which no sense whatsoever can be made. all conflict. Jung.
Saying, bro, saying that there's good and evil is schizophrenic is a crazy connection / analogy. Like bro, which lays some negative connotation on schizophrenia, which there already is, but I mean,
I would say it lays
that's a powerful analogy.
I would say it lays some positive on it. That schizophrenia is just potentially just a reinterpretation of what is actually happening, but
yeah,
it's not happening.
Nice.
It's just a different it's just a reinterpretation of it.
Yeah, so he's like, it's schizophrenic to think that the whole world comes down to a constant battle of good and evil. It's schizophrenic to think in yourself there's an irreducible good and evil. It's schizophrenic to think in someone else, right? Like, because, and he made this distinction. He said, and to think that it doesn't come from the same whole. Right? So, like, think of the yin yang, like, think of our logo, right? Like, the fucking.
Exactly.
It is two parts of a whole that make up the circle, right? And they divide into this beautiful yin yang. And notice in the yin there's some of the yang and vice versa. And like they define each other. They are part of a whole. Like it is because system. Of one that the other exists.
It's a system in which the rest of it is what's happening based on the system, and the inputs determine whether the sensors are more good or more bad, but the system is always sensing.
Dude, Drew, great. Dude, I love your perspective. I'm recalling a little bit back to my initial thought of schizophrenia being negatively connotated from what he said. But as a whole, what he's saying is you have to be able to accept the good and the evil, right? And so you're right. It does kind of paint a positive light on the schizophrenia, because if you can't accept the quote unquote evil or quote unquote bad, right, then you're not going to be able to
and
accept or come full circle, the yin and yang of the duality of it, and
actually embrace the light that you are able to shine. You can't shine as bright as you want unless you embrace the darkness. Like a lamp shining on the more brilliant a lamp, the darker the cloud that is beneath it in the shadow. It's just the same idea, right?
This guy's bars are so much better than all the cliches out there.
Right.
It reminds me of this schizophrenia talk is reminding me of the Hello Ren song.
Yeah. For sure.
It's good.
For sure.
I'm glad you love that
song. That popped up on my For You recently on YouTube. So
yeah, that's in like my top 10 to 20 of all time. Like it's
for sure. It's iconic now in my
really
mind.
Really good. Yeah. All right, let's keep this going.
Okay.
All conflict, Jung was saying, all opposition has its resolution in an underlying unity. You cannot understand the meaning of to be unless you understand the meaning of not to be. You cannot understand the meaning of good unless you understand the meaning of evil. Even St. Thomas Aquinas saw this, for he said, "The justice is the silent pause which gives sweetness to the chant. So it is suffering, and so it is evil, which makes possible the recognition of virtue." This is not, as Jung tries to explain, a philosophy of condoning the evil. To take the opposite position, he said, and to agree with the patient offhand is also of no use, but estranges him, the doctor, or estranges him, the patient, as much as condemnation. Let me continue further, reading from this extraordinary passage. Healing may be called, Jung says, a religious problem. In the sphere of social or national relations, the state of suffering may be civil war, and this state is to be cured by the Christian virtue of forgiveness and love of one's enemies. That which we recommend, with the conviction of good Christians as applicable to external situations, we must also apply inwardly in the treatment of neurosis. This is why modern man has heard enough about guilt and sin. He is sorely beset by his own bad conscience, and wants rather to know how he is to reconcile himself with his own nature, how he is to love the enemy in his own heart, and call the wolf his brother. The modern man does not want to know in what way he can imitate Christ, but in what way he can live his own individual life, however meager and uninteresting it may be. It is because every form of imitation seems to him deadening and sterile that he rebels against the force of tradition that would hold him to well-trodden ways. All such roads for him lead in the wrong direction. He may not know it, but he behaves as if his own individual life were God's special will which must be fulfilled at all costs. This is the source of his egoism, which is one of the most tangible evils of the neurotic state. But the person who tells him he is too egoistic has already lost his confidence, and rightly so, for that person has driven him still further into his neurosis. If I wish to effect a cure for my patients, I am forced to acknowledge the deep significance of their egoism. I should be blind indeed if I did not recognize it as a true will of God. I must even help the patient.
So what I got from that really is like the idea of like a PTS patient from like a war, like some sort of military or otherwise person who's like been like traumatized by war. And a lot of the patients, as he says right here, is they're like being used like the mushrooms and other psychedelics to like help with their PTSD. And that's just like an interesting, like, I don't know, like it just fully, like the wolf, you know, like that whole segment that they were talking about there just reminded me of like somebody having to like go into the depths of like what it is to be evil and then like do all those things, but still have to like come back to normal life and try to like live a normal life.
Yeah.
And like not being able to like come to terms with that. And so they rebel back into egoism. And then they see themselves, and you see like a lot of these like a lot of these quote unquote like terrorism acts where there's like ex-military people like forming militias or whatever. And like you see some of that where these people come out like, I'm the will of God or whatever. And it just reminded me of like some of that stuff. Thought it was an interesting sidebar.
I couldn't comprehend most of the stuff you were saying there.
Okay.
I want to go back to here where he switched sections.
To go into egoism, yeah.
But the person who tells him he is too egoistic has already lost his confidence, and rightly so, for that person has driven him still further into his neurosis. If I wish to effect a cure for my patients, I am forced to acknowledge the deep significance of their egoism. I should be blind indeed if I did not recognize it as a true will of God. I must even help the patient to prevail in his egoism. If he succeeds in this, he estranges himself from other people. He drives them away, and they come to themselves as they should, for they were seeking to rob him of his sacred egoism. This must be left to him, for it is his strongest and healthiest power. It is, as I have said, a true will of God, which sometimes drives him into complete isolation. However wretched this state may be, it also stands him in good stead. For in this way alone can he get to know himself and learn what an invaluable treasure is the love of his fellow beings. It is, moreover, only in the state of complete abandonment and loneliness that we experience the helpful powers of our own natures.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically...
So it sounds like he's kind of saying, like, when someone's going down this, like, dark isolation spiral, it may be the case that they actually need that. It may be the case that that's part of God's plan. That's part of, like, how they need to understand what they're withdrawing from by withdrawing.
Yeah,
which is terrifying if you like to hear it put that way, but
it also can just be a probabilistic thing too, right? Like you make enough points in a certain direction, and inevitably you're going to fall into the cavity in the certain direction of which you're going, right? And then like it might just pull you in. So it's less of just like, you know, certain, you know, spiritual things, but yeah, it could be a probabilistic thing that anyway.
All right, we're 4 minutes out. Let's finish this thing out.
End of quote. This is a very striking example of Jung's power to comprehend and integrate points of view as well as psychological attitudes that seem on the surface to be completely antithetical. For example, even in his own work, when he was devoting himself to the study of Eastern philosophy, he had some difficulty in comprehending the, let's say, the Buddhistic denial of the reality of the ego. But you can see that in practice, in what he was actually trying to get at, he was moving towards the same position that is intended in both the Hindu and the Buddhist philosophy about the nature of the ego. Just, for example, as the Hindu will say, that the I principle in man is not really a separate ego, but an expression of the universal life of Brahman or the Godhead. So Jung is saying here that the development of the ego in man is a true will of God, and that it is only by following the ego that one, and developing it to its full extent, that one fulfills the function which this, you might say, temporary illusion has in man's psychic life. For he goes on and says here, when one has several times seen this development at work, one can no longer deny that what was evil has turned to good, and that what seemed good has kept alive the forces of evil. The archdemon of egoism leads us along the royal road to that ingathering which religious experience demands.
All right, so this is one of the parts I was looking forward to talking about. So he's saying in this like absolute like pursuit of evil, like, how did he word this?
When one has several times seen this development at work, one can no longer deny that what was evil has turned to good, and that what seemed good has kept alive the forces of evil.
So what was evil has turned to good, and what was once good has kept alive the forces of evil. And I want to point that out because there are times in life where like one's own pursuit of good allows them to tread down paths to support causes outside of their control that are marketed towards that good feeling in you, but are actually supporting evil. So it could be the case that as you pursue this good, you can be keeping alive the evil. And I've always had a hard time understanding how like I've had I can see how like if you go down the darkness, like you can become, you're there until you come back, right? And so when you come back, you've clearly come back because you understand the difference now. But like I have had a hard time understanding like if you go towards the side of light, like how can that cause evil? But it can cause evil in like by almost like disconnecting yourself from that goodness, by like,
well, you're disconnecting yourself from your badness, right? When you're
Right.
going good, you're
Right.
disconnecting yourself from your bad. It's just a classic Anakin Skywalker dilemma, right?
and it's like
You're-
naive
you're-
trust, and you're like putting
have-
money towards people who are saying the right things with the words of good,
Right.
And you have the intent of good, but you
but
haven't.
But you're in a situation now where you
Now
see
you're
the clear
supporting someone
good,
who's doing
but
evil
somebody
through-
who in the ideals of good is doing something evil.
Right.
You are forced to be like, no, this is terrible. So you choose the thing that you think is good based on
Right.
the evil you think was what is death.
It's
right?
like so many times
It's the
in history.
but what you're doing is you're going against good in order to allow yourself to dip into the evil to save the person who was about to die. It's like a whole, like it's
Or it's
just
like,
everything you do,
yeah.
everything in life that you do. Basically, the idea is like everything you do in life has good and evil intentions behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Every decision you make, every word you say, everything you do really does have good and bad intentions behind them. And you have to understand that that is what's happening
Yeah.
so that you can grapple with the decisions you make on a day-to-day basis, right? When you decide to say the certain things and do the certain, this is where it's more applicable.
And he's talking about the egoism aspect of it here.
Exactly.
So, right?
Yeah.
Like in an egoistic way, if you pursue good, like from an egotistical standpoint, that egoism can allow that instinct for good to end up actually protecting or funding or like causing evil.
Yeah. Well, at least more bad intent or malintent.
But it's the
inside.
ego that led you to do that. So like that wasn't your intent, like your ego. Like, no. Like, right? But like in
not
fact,
separated, yeah.
you may have actually caused, prevented, elongated, protected evil in your pursuit of good because it's an egoistic
and then it
pursuit of
comes
good.
out in such a hard and that was the kind of the idea he was going with earlier with like the idea that there's like a ripple effect or a shadow effect of like how good you are or how evil you are. It kind of like stems with how like good or evil you perceive yourself to be.
Yeah.
So like that idea of like once you protect yourself so heavily and like you're trying to pursue good and you protect yourself so heavily from anything bad, when you do start to seed into the idea that you could be bad, it explodes. And like you have the potential for doing even the most heinous of bad because of how good you've tried to be or how elongated you've made the process, right?
Right.
So like even the opposite, right? Like so how if you're just a bad guy or whatever and you just do bad, and then like there's an instance where you can do like the most good.
Right.
And like you have that potential.
And then that can change you. That can be that dot in that white dot inside the black part side of the yin yang that ends up like pushing you back towards the good.
Yeah. That's what makes it an ever-ending cycle, right?
Right. All right, let's just
Finish
2
this
minutes
out.
left.
The archdemon of egoism leads us along the royal road to that ingathering which religious experience demands. What we observe here is a fundamental law of life, Enantiodromia, or conversion into the opposite. And it is this that makes possible the reunion of the warring halves of the personality, and thereby brings the civil war to an end. End of quote. In other words, he was seeing that, as Blake said, a fool who persists in his folly will become wise. That the development of egoism in man is not something to be overcome or better integrated by opposition to it, but by following it. It's almost, isn't it, the principle of judo, not overcoming what appears to be a hostile force by opposing it, but by swinging with the punch or rolling with the punch. And so by following the ego transcends itself. And in this moment of insight, the great Westerner, who comes out of a whole tradition of human personality which centers it upon the ego, upon individual separateness, by going along consistently with this principle, comes to the same position as the Easterner. That is to say, to the point of view where one sees conflict, which at first sight had seemed absolute, as resting upon a primordial unity, and thereby attaining a profound, unshakable peace of the heart, which can nevertheless contain conflict, not a peace that is simply static and lifeless, but a peace that passes understanding.
That's it.
Yeah.
What do you call it? Transmogrification or whatever?
Transmography.
Yeah. This is by following the one, it turns into the other.
That's an idea from
Interesting.
That's an idea from what? Where does that idea come from?
I don't know if he said, but I like the idea.
Transmography. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I don't know much about transmography.
Wait, he said transmography? He didn't say that.
He said transform, transmute, trans something. I don't know.
Transformers. It's a good movie.
Transmography is a cool word, even if it's not real.
We'll look it up. We'll figure it out for the next one.
All right.
Where are we at? Oh, yeah, we're about time here.
We made our time here.
Anyway, well, I think that was fascinating. I think that's a lot of, philosophy is just interesting. I feel like we could put it on any philosopher's ideas and just listen
talk
to
about
it and
it.
talk about it is fun for me.
Yeah.
I like this style, just where you just listen to it and just come up with whatever you got, especially with whatever you've already been thinking about, and just like let yourself flow with these ideas, you know?
I just think this whole thing I thought it was educational, similar to High Ren.
Yeah.
Because if you remember in High Ren, what was his speech at the end? His speech at the end was saying you had to understand that the dark and the light both exist in you, and it's a dance that's going and you can fight that dance and you can get all uptight and you can trip and fall and falter, or you can relax and you can go with that dance, and then things become easier. It seems very on brand with what this video is about. We have our light and we have our dark, but the more you reject your dark, then the more it manifests in your life.
Yeah.
Not only that, but talking about good and evil is a pretty prime example of duality on Duality Check.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Thank you all for listening. If you guys are listening on Apple Podcasts or any of the podcast platforms and you guys want to see the video, like my nephew said, he wants to see some video. If you're a visual learner and you want to see some of these videos while you're listening, hit us up on YouTube or Rumble. You can see all the video alongside the audio. But if you want to see all of the links and videos and just want to get inside of Duality Check, go to dualitycheck.net.
Oh, by the way, on that note, last week I tried for the first time. I realized you can actually embed things on our website.
Okay.
I was just doing images, but now I'm embedding tweets, embedding videos from Twitter and stuff like that. I'm trying to have it so if you go to the website page for whatever episode, every video, every audio, whatever, it's there. You can just go to that page, press play, and follow along with whatever you're talking about.
Oh yeah, there you go. dualitycheck.net. If you guys want to get involved, hit us up on, you guys can email us at host@dualitycheck.net or hit us up on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Instagram, DM us. Let us know if you guys are...
Sorry, I accidentally cut you off, so goodbye. Oh.
Bye. See you later.
Cheers. Happy Friday. It's not Friday.
Yeah, it's
For them, it's not.
It's Friday.
For them, it's Tuesday.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday, y'all. Enjoy your week, and we'll see y'all again on Tuesday of next week. So, later.
Bye. Adios.